In conversation with Ellis Shuman. Ellis Shuman is an American-born Israeli author, travel writer, and book reviewer. His writing has appeared in the Jerusalem Post, the Times of Israel, and the Huffington Post. His short fiction has been nominated for the Pushcart Prize and has appeared in Isele Magazine, Vagabond, The Right Launch, Esoterica, Jewish Literary Journal, San Antonio Review, and other literary publications. He is the author of the Virtual Kibbutz, Valley of Thracian, the Burgas Affairs, and Rakia. And on today's episode of Author Interview, it's my utmost pleasure and joy to offer the show today, Ellis Shuman. How are you doing, Ellis?
Hello, I'm doing fine. I'm so pleased to be a guest on the show and to talk about myself, my books, my writing, and
Abs-
it's a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure as well, actually. Quite exciting, actually, to have another author joining us from Israel. Been a while, actually. I spoke with someone from Israel. Quite lovely to have you on the show. Thanks for coming on.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, yeah. So, Alice, could you tell us about your book, Rakia, Stories of Bulgarian, whom I found the description page of it to be quite lovely, captivating, and compelling. And I'd love to ask you, how does this book come about? How did an American-born Israelite author come to write a book about Bulgaria? Quite confusing to me, but I'd love you to shed some light.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about my book, Rakia, Stories of Bulgaria.
Mm,
And before I talk about the book itself, let me give you some background about myself and how I actually came to write
yeah,
a book on this topic.
good
I
one.
was born in the United States. I grew up, my first 15 years were in a small community in the central part of the United States. At the age of 15, my parents brought our entire family, moved to Israel, to Jerusalem
Mm,
in Israel, for ideological and religious reasons. We believed that the Jewish state was where we were supposed to live. So I grew up in Jerusalem, finished high school, served in the Israeli army, uh, lived and worked on a kibbutz, a collective farming settlement in
mm,
the desert, got married, had a family, and went on to become a productive member of Israeli society, I hope.
mm.
My career has taken me in different directions. I've worked in the hotel industry. I've worked, of course, on agricultural farms. And since the last 25 years, I've been working on the internet, different sites for different directions.
Mm,
Um, my last jobs have been in online marketing, marketing different products or gaming on the internet to global audiences. One of my positions, my boss came to tell me it was that my job was in Tel Aviv. It is still in Tel Aviv. My boss came to tell me, we're relocating your job to Sofia, Bulgaria for 2 years.
wow.
Either you take the position or we'll give it to someone else who will become your boss. You
Wow.
have one week to decide whether to go to Bulgaria for a 2 year relocation contract.
Wow.
So I went with my wife to Bulgaria. Our children have grown and left home, so we could take on this new adventure.
Mm,
And we relocated and lived in Sofia, Bulgaria for 2 years,
wow.
working and experiencing the country. I'll talk a little bit more about what we found in Bulgaria. But I can say in a nutshell, I fell in love with Bulgaria, fell in love with the
Mm,
country. The 2 years came to an end. We came back to Israel, to our home in Israel, to our family. It was, of course, good to come home to see our grandchildren being born in Israel.
mm,
But in many ways, my heart remained in Bulgaria. I
wow.
still thinking and dreaming and experiencing Bulgaria. And of course, I missed the country. So I realized I could come back to Bulgaria every single day in my writing. Every
Mm,
single day, I could write travel reports. I could write
Mm,
stories of what it was like to live in Bulgaria. And I was able to write fiction about things happening in Bulgaria in my creative way of thinking.
mm,
So the result was two novels set in Bulgaria and my new book, which just came out a month and a half ago. Rakia is my new
wow.
book, stories set in Bulgaria, in which I can share in some way my love and appreciation for Bulgaria with readers who might not know too much about that country.
Mm. Wow, I love your trunk load of answers to this. I love hearing about your history, your the work transfer, and how you were born in America and how you lived and worked in Bulgaria. That's quite beautiful. And from what I've seen on internet, Bulgaria seems to be a very beautiful city, really. Beautiful country, actually. Yeah, I've seen videos of, movies being shot in Bulgaria and it's quite beautiful, quite lovely. So I enjoy you talking about your beat, about your background, and how your work ethic took you there. Quite beautiful to know. Thanks for the short story.
Yes.
I never wanted it to
Yeah.
stop.
Well, I can say I live in Israel, which is also a very beautiful, fascinating
Hmm.
country.
Yeah.
So much history, culture, religion, traditions. Uh, it's always an interesting, challenging place to live. But many people around the world are familiar with Israel,
Hmm.
positively and possibly negatively. They know something about what's going on in Israel. And I'm glad to write about Israel as well.
Hmm.
Bulgaria,
Yeah.
on the other, is not easily, not too many people are familiar with Bulgaria. Many people could not even place it on the map, on the globe. Where is it? So that is what I'm sharing with readers.
Yeah. That's quite amazing. Thanks for sharing. Thank you. Now, for readers who haven't read the book yet, and without giving much information away, could we have a sneak of what we'd expect in terms of themes picking up Rakia, stories of Bulgaria?
The book is composed of 12 short stories,
Wow.
all, all of them set in Bulgaria. But some of them are told in the voices of native born Bulgarians, and others are told in the voices or perspectives of people visiting Bulgaria for the first time, either as a tourist or similar to my background, working
Hmm.
in Bulgaria for a short period of time, visiting on their vacation. So the stories are mixed. I hope I have done a good job of giving voice to native born Bulgarians and
Hmm.
expressing how they relate to their country. Certainly, as someone who lived temporarily in Bulgaria, I can share the beauty and culture and traditions as from someone who is seeing it for the first time with the goal of enticing people to not only read, but to consider Bulgaria as a travel destination. Um,
Hmm.
one story in particular I would like to mention. I've never in the past written historical fiction. I've never
Wow.
done that before by writing fiction at all. But one story I believe I tell included a period of Bulgarian history, which was Bulgaria, how it related to its Jewish people during the Second World War,
Hmm.
how they were saved from the Holocaust. I won't go into too much details of that story, but it basically is a modern day Israeli meets a Bulgarian veteran of that period. So through
Hmm.
their eyes, I am able to look at the past, what happened during World War II in Bulgaria. So in a way, I did write historical fiction in the end, and that is included in the book as well.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. I love your take on this actually. Sounds quite lovely to me. Thank you for mentioning. I really enjoy your answers to this question and the story in Rakia, Straits of Bulgaria. Thank you. Thank you. Now, apart from Rakia, Stories of Bulgaria, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on? And also, what sort of things do readers not know about Bulgaria that you think was included in your book?
Yes. Okay. So let me start with the first part.
Yeah.
Um, when I came back from Bulgaria, many of the articles, as I said, were travel articles, but I had a desire to write fiction. The
Oh.
first novel I wrote was called Valley of Thracians. Thracians, for people who are not familiar, were a militant tribal people who ruled in Bulgaria and the Balkans 4,000 years ago, even before the
Mm.
Romans. So
Wow.
there's no trace of them today except for their gold and silver utensils and their tombs, which are still all over the Bulgarian landscape. So my
Mm.
story is a modern story in Bulgaria, but it relates to Bulgaria's history. It's not historical fiction, but it relates to that period of time in Bulgaria's past. My second novel, The Burgas Affair, is a fictional account of a very real terrorist attack at Burgas, Bulgaria's airport in 2012, when
Mm.
a group of Israelis had landed at um, Burgas Airport. It's an airport in eastern Bulgaria. And as
Mm.
they got off the plane and onto their bus, a suicide bomber blew up his bomb, and 5 Israelis and a Bulgarian bus driver were killed. My book is fictional, and it follows an investigation, a joint Bulgarian Israeli investigation into what happened after that very
Wow.
real terrorist attack. So those are two novels. Those are two novels that I previously wrote. And the Rakia is a collection of short stories, which is completely new.
Wow.
As to the other part of your questions, what would readers not necessarily know about Bulgaria
Bulgaria.
and what I'm sharing in my writing, both nonfiction and fiction, is Bulgaria has a very beautiful country. Let's start with nature. It has very
Mm.
beautiful mountains, forests, water, rivers, waterfalls,
Wow.
caves. It's a uniquely beautiful country. Um, Israel, on the other hand, we have a lot of desert in Bulgaria. There's sea coast. There's skiing in the winter. There's mountains to climb in the summer. There's so much nature. That's
Wow.
one thing that really impressed. Second of all, there are picturesque villages all country, uh, small villages that have a very unique uh, past history. Their architecture, these homes in the villages are very quaint. They have
Mm.
old traditions still today. Um,
Interesting.
Many of them are very small. Many of them are not too big that people are leaving them and going to the city.
Mm.
Bulgaria is also a very secular country. It's not that religion, it does not play a major role in the country, but on the other hand, Bulgarians have a very strong connection to their religious history. There are so
Oh.
many monasteries all over the country.
Wow.
Bulgaria, the main religion is East Bulgarian Orthodoxy. It's an Orthodox church. It's Bulgarian, uh, and there are churches and monasteries all over the country. They're stunning. They're very visit, and Bulgarians do visit their monasteries because they honor this tradition, even though they might not personally be religious.
Wow.
Then, then there is culture. Bulgaria has unique culture and traditions about
Mm.
how they do things. I'll give you one example. Something we learned right away when we arrived in Bulgaria is when Bulgarians say yes, they shake their head left and right. When they say no, they go like this, which is the opposite. When I say yes, I go like this, but they say like this. They nod their head and shake their head completely opposite to something you're familiar with. That's just idiosyncrasy. It's obviously traditional. Modern day Bulgarians might not necessarily follow that tradition, but it's certainly one of the interesting things we learned about Bulgarians. And there's so much more. There's Bulgarian cuisine, how they're fresh vegetables and salads and fruits, and many traditional dishes. It's all unique. It's all something you only see in Bulgaria. And it just sticks with us when we came back to Israel. And
Wow.
some of this I can only share by talking about it, but wanted to share that feeling in my writing as well, to encourage people to know about Bulgaria and to possibly visit Bulgaria after reading my stories and novels.
Wow. That's quite amazing, actually. That's a trunk load of things to know about Bulgaria. I love you talking about the nature aspect and the ed nodding too. That sounds quite fun. And again, to know you have other works you're working on, that sounds like a trunk load. And I hope you often find some times to sleep.
Yes. Many of my ideas come to me while I sleep. That's part of, we'll talk about my writing process, but a lot of times I wake up with ideas in my mind.
Hmm. Yeah, that's quite amazing. Thank you for sharing. Now, I'd also like to ask you, what actually is Rakia? Also, among novels and short stories, which do you prefer to write? Which one comes to you easily? And now you may want to divert your answer a bit, talking about your writing process and how you get inspirations and ideas. Yeah.
Okay, so again, my book is Rakia, Stories of Bulgaria. Rakia, I spoke in brief that Bulgaria has its own unique cuisine. Rakia is actually an alcoholic drink, a traditional alcoholic drink that is not only in Bulgaria, there's different versions of it in Turkey, Serbia, and Macedonia. They all have different versions of this drink. Even in Italy, there's a drink called grappa that it's a highly alcoholic drink. In
Mm,
Bulgaria, uh, it is made processed by major big companies, but what is unique about Rakia in Bulgaria is that many people make it in their houses. They make it in their garages. They make it in their basements. Homemade Rakia has a very high alcoholic content. You drink
wow.
it, it'll knock you out, but it's traditional, and Bulgarians have it with their meals. They say a toast at the start of their meal, lifting a glass of rakia and toasting each other's health. And I felt that one thing that ran through many of my stories, my
Yeah.
characters, whether they're tourists visiting first time or native born Bulgarians, they're always enjoying a glass of rakia at mealtime. So
Wow.
the 12 stories, I cannot say that it appears in all 12 stories, but it's always there somewhere in the background. Bulgarians raising their toast of rakia, and it connects the stories in some way, just like Bulgaria connects the stories. So that's rakia. And
Hmm.
I wish I could offer you a glass right now, but I don't have any homemade rakia with me today.
Wow, that's quite
So
fun.
so the other question was
Yeah, among novels
what
and short stories, which do you prefer to write?
okay. So I wrote my first book was actually a collection of short stories called the Virtual Kibbutz. Kibbutz is a collective settlement in Israel where members share in the workload, as in working on sharing and decision making. My wife and I lived on a kibbutz for
Hmm.
6.5 years. So my first book was a collection of short stories based on life on the kibbutz. Coming back from
Oh,
Bulgaria, I wrote two novels, the two novels I mentioned, and now I turn to a collection of short stories. I've always enjoyed writing novels and taking something, exploring it through many pages and many characters and many different angles. But writing a novel takes a long time to write. Even if you can envision it all in your mind from the beginning, it'll take a long time to write. Short
yeah.
stories, on the other hand, I can see the beginning and the end in, like, I know how to get there in a very short writing session. I could write a short story within a few days. Then, of course, you have to edit it and
Yeah.
fixing the language and the grammar, whatever. But I basically can tell a whole story in a very short number of pages. It's a
Hmm.
challenge, but I think I've grown to love that challenge more than writing a novel. The short stories about Bulgaria, I've of course written many more short stories on other topics, on Israel, on life as a writer, on life in general. So I think I'm more drawn to writing short stories because it's something I can handle, start, finish, and come up with a complete project that will
Mm.
be done in a relatively short amount of time.
Wow, that's quite amazing, actually. I enjoy you talking about your writing process, and of course, I do agree with you. Writing novels actually take a long time, and that's why I'm always fascinated on how writers, especially novelists like yourself, could craft long sentences and bring words together in a way that it eventually makes a great novel. I mean, you have a paragraph coming together to make a page, and page coming together to make chapters, and chapters compiling themselves together to make an amazing chunk, old, voluminous novel. And this always leaves me thinking about how exactly did they got the ideas and inspiration to put these words together in a way that it makes sense and make a story eventually. And now, Alice, as far as writing is concerned, I'd love to ask you, how do you get your inspirations and ideas? Where did they come from?
Well, as you know from my two novels and my short story collection, a lot of it was inspiration from the 2 years my wife and I lived in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Um, I have gone back to Bulgaria since. Gone back to Bulgaria a few times, including I've spent a lot of time hiking Bulgarian mountains.
Mm,
It's very beautiful hiking. The mountains are stunning. Everything I saw and did and experienced in Bulgaria, all our travels, and we traveled extensively around
mm,
Bulgaria, as I mentioned, the villages to the cities. If it was Sofia was the biggest city in Bulgaria, we lived
wow.
there. We traveled to other major cities in Bulgaria, Plovdiv and Varna and Burgas. I mentioned Burgas in one of my other novels.
Mm,
Everywhere we went was just like coming in. I was just absorbing everything around me, the culture, the history, the traditions, the scenery, the nature, everything filtered into my creativity, which
mm,
only began to find its expression after my return to Israel. After I returned
wow.
to Israel, as I mentioned, a creative mind, my heart was still in Bulgaria, and I was able to write down nonfiction and fiction based on what I had seen and done during those 2 years.
Mm,
Some of the stories, some of the every all 12 stories are entirely fictional. Let's start with that.
wow.
But some of the stories were inspired by real events or real things that happened either to me or real places that I visited. As I
Mm,
mentioned to you earlier, one of the stories is based on what happened during the Holocaust, during World War II in Bulgaria. That, of course, is a very real story, which I related to in my fiction. I cannot guarantee, I did my best to accurately portray that period of history. But
mm,
again, my story is a work of fiction, but it was by what I had learned while living in Bulgaria of this period in history that was quite remarkable, and I couldn't stop thinking about that. So that I
wow.
wanted to express by writing that story. Other stories, I'll give you another example. There's a story in the collection called
Yeah.
The Volcano. The Volcano. Bulgaria has no volcanoes, no active volcanoes, but
Mm,
there was an active volcano in Iceland in 2010. The volcano in Iceland sent up so much ash into the atmosphere all over Europe that all flights stopped in Europe. No flights could take place in Europe because the pilots, of course, couldn't navigate their planes in the skies over Europe.
mm,
Bulgaria was is in Eastern Europe, and it just so happened that when this actual event occurred,
yeah.
my daughter was about to give birth in Tel Aviv. My wife wanted to attend our granddaughter's birth. So she had a flight booked from Sofia, Bulgaria to Tel Aviv, Israel, but all the flights all over Europe were being canceled. So
Wow.
she wasn't guaranteed a flight back to Israel in time for my granddaughter's birth.
Wow.
This real story inspired the story The Volcano in the collection of stories where a character is working in Sofia, remote uh, relocation contract, and his wife is about to give birth in Israel, and he has to get
Hmm.
back in time, but flights are being canceled all over Europe. So
Interesting.
that's the short story based on a real event in my wife and my life. The surprise I won't tell you how the story ended in the book, but in real life, my wife, the flight from Sofia to Bulgaria to Tel Aviv actually took off, and my wife
Wow.
got back in time to see her granddaughter being born. That's the real
Wow.
story. The fictional story, you'll have to read the book to
Yeah,
understand what happened in that.
absolutely. Absolutely. I love your take on this actually. And thank you so much for
So that's a
sharing.
real story. That's a
Yeah.
real story that inspired one of the fictional stories in the book.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Love your answers to that actually. Sounds quite lovely and quite amazing to me. That was quite pulling. That's a trunkload of stories you've got there. Amazing. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for
Okay.
sharing. Yeah, and before we call it a day, I would love to ask you, as a published author, what sort of advice do you have for other writers who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book? What would you advise people in this category? And also, just in case we have some people who are currently watching this interview and would love to get a copy of your book, Rakia, on what platform can you get a copy?
So let me start with the first part, which is advice to other writers. I'll
Yeah.
describe my writing process. Maybe other writers and hopefully other future authors can take inspiration from the way I go about my writing. I mentioned earlier that some of the ideas come to me in my sleep, and that's actually a true thing. I'm a very much a morning person, a morning as in I get up in the morning and I have a lot of creativity waiting to express itself. Before I even show up at my office to start my day to day job in online marketing, I sit down at a coffee shop and over a cup of cappuccino, I take off my laptop for 1 hour of creative writing. 1 hour, as much as I can get down. Well, it's not onto paper, onto my laptop screen, and
Mm.
to write as much as I can. Um, I actually enjoy the editing process more than the writing process. So you get
Oh,
your first draft down, and
yeah.
then you come back to it and make it real, make your words shine, make your story come
Mm.
together. So the first draft could be very rough. You won't even like it, but and readers certainly won't like it, but you come back to it, edit it, not only for spelling and punctuation and grammar, whatever, but you have to make sure your characters are the way you want them to be. The story is progressing the way you want it to be, that you get from the beginning to the end that you want to conclude the story. Will readers
Mm.
find satisfaction in not only the story, but its ending? Um, Many of the readers of the stories in Rakia have said, well, the ending was not 100% conclusive, but sometimes that is the goal of the writer. He doesn't want to have every story have a typically happy ending. Sometimes you finish a story, you have to think about it. What is going to happen next? The author doesn't always give you the answers. So,
Mm.
all this is part of your editing process.
Yeah.
But then you also should consider, if you're a writer of a short story or a novel, of having someone else read what you have written. Another
Mm.
pair of eyes can sometimes see things that you didn't see. You could go over a draft
Absolutely.
of a story or a novel, over and over, and the person will say, but you repeated this sentence on page 3 and then again on page 10. You didn't even see that you repeated the same sentence twice in a story. Only a reader. Okay, so write what you want to write, get it down on paper on the laptop, and edit it even with the help of someone else to look at it. But start writing. That's the first thing. Write.
Absolutely.
The one word of advice to future writers and authors would be write.
That's great.
Regarding my book Rakia, as well as my other 2 novels, they're all available on Amazon, Amazon.com, Amazon.co.uk, all the Amazon platforms. They can be ordered in paperback or hardcover. They're all available in those platforms. Readers can find more about me on my blog, my personal blog, which is ellisshuman.blogspot.com, ELLISSHUMAN.blogspot, BLOGSPOT.com.
Yeah.
I am also active on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. All you have to do is search for my name, Ellis Shuman, and you'll find me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Ellis Shuman's books directly on Amazon. I also left a link to his social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Ellis, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. It's awesome having this conversation with you.
Well, it was great to meet you. Great to talk to you.